In this video, you will see what is the top 10 must-have units in the Fire Force Anime Last Stand update. Every units in this video are all obtainable and not from trading. I do want to know, what do you think is the best unit in this Fire Force update? Remember to subscribe and like, and with that being said, in no particular order, the first must-have unit is Benimaru, Destruction King. Benimaru is one of the newest evolved unit added in this Fire Force update, and he became the best Dark Hill unit with his insane Dark Flame damage and passive. Benimaru Destruction King stats a max upgrade and max LR, 125 million damage with his Dark Flame dealing 602 million damage and his SP at 7.75 seconds, making his damage per second at 93,806,451. Benimaru has a second effect, Sunburn. Inflicted enemies receive 175% of this unit's damage over 4 seconds and have their movement speed reduced by 17%. Benimaru's first passive, second generation pyrokinetic. This unit, Black Flame's duration, is equal to this unit's current SPA. Its second passive, Master of Pyrokinesis, for every burn effect on an enemy is currently under, deal 10% damage up to 40% more damage. At later upgrades, Benimaru will get an ability Perfect Pyrokinesis. When activating, all enemies currently in this unit's AoE will have any current burn instance instantly deal its total damage. Every time an enemy is hit with this ability, it permanently takes 10% more damage from any source of burn up to 100%. For every enemy in this unit's AoE, plus 1% damage per enemy up to 50%, and this buff lasts for 60 seconds. How to evolve Benimaru is by doing the new legend stages and completing multiple of Infernal Dungeon to be able to craft Benimaru's evolution item. Benimaru Destruction King best traits are Glitched, Avatar, and Overlord. Alright, next unit is Aizen Mugen. Aizen is one of the strongest dark unit with his passives and ability he gets at later upgrades in this new Anime Last Stand Fire Force update. Aizen Mugen stats a max upgrade and max LR, 306 million damage with his SP at 10.5 seconds, making his damage per second at 29,142,857. which is one of the most overpowered damage per second, especially he becomes full AoE at later upgrades. Aizen Mugen's passive Shatter Togetsu. When enemies enter Aizen's range, they permanently take 10% more damage from all sources. Once the enemies are within 50% of Aizen's range, they take 25% more damage from all sources, and once the enemies reach 15% of this unit's range, enemies will take 35% more damage from all sources, and Aizen will deal 50% more damage. Damn! At later upgrades, he gets a new ability, Hodo 90. When activated, it will deal 5 times of Aizen's current damage, and enemies hit by this ability, it will permanently take 2 times more damage from this unit. His second ability, Koro Hatsugo, when it activates, it will deal 7.5 times of this unit's current damage and inflict bleed off that multiplier, as well as time stop all enemies in this unit's range for 10 seconds, and enemies that are hit by this ability will take 20% more damage, which is insanely overpowered. Okay, next unit is Zufi Sun God. Luffy is one of the best lightly godly unit with its overpowered passives and stats at later upgrades. Zufi Sun God stats a max upgrade and max LR, 265 million damage with his SP at 3.57 seconds, making his damage per second at 85,434,173. Luffy's first passive, Cartoon Logic. When this unit is going to be stunned, dodge the stun and have Luffy's next attack be guaranteed crit with plus 700% crit damage. Luffy's second passive, Liberating Drums. Every 5 attacks inflict a conquered effect, which stuns for 8 seconds. At later upgrades, Luffy will get an ability, Ultimate Gun. When activated, it will deal 150 billion damage to all enemies. All enemies hit receive 50% increased critical damage for 100 seconds. Alright, next one is Giorno Requiem. Giorno is one of the best nature units with his slow, and he can heal your base as he attacks. Giorno Requiem stats a max upgrade and max LR, 254 million damage with his SP at 6.78 seconds, making his damage per second at 37,463,126. Giorno Requiem's passive, Life Control, drain 0.95% of the enemy's max HP every hit, and it is not said on his unit info, but he heals your base as well if your base takes a hit, which is extremely overpowered for clutching in waves. At later upgrades, he will gain an ability, 0. When activated, set base HP to 1 and send all enemies on map to the spawn, slowing all enemies down by 90% and decreases HP of all enemies by 10% after using the ability, although he cannot attack for the next 30 seconds. Okay, next unit is Strongest Sorcerer Unsealed. Gojo became one of the strongest light unit with his insane damage and Luke ability he gets at later upgrades. Strongest Sorcerer Unsealed stats at max upgrade and max FLR, 506 million damage with his SP at 9.93 seconds, making his damage per second at 15,956,696, which is insanely broken, making him one of the strongest light units to have. And at later upgrades, Gojo will get an ability called Purple Maximum X. When activated, it will deal 400 billion damage, affecting all enemies even outside of his range, which is insanely meta, and it will make your grind a lot easier when having Gojo in your loadout. Gojo's first passive, Infinity. When enemies are in 100% to 75% of this unit's range, they are slowed by 10%. When they are 74% to 50%, they are slowed by 20%. When in 49% to 25%, they are slowed by 30%. And at 24% and below of this unit's range, the enemies are slowed by 35% and will take 25% more damage from this unit. Wow. Gojo's second passive, Black Spark. This unit has a 35% chance to deal 1.5 times more damage every hit when this unit hits a Black Spark. Reduces this unit's SPI by 10% for 20 seconds. Strongest Sorcerer Unsealed best traits are Glitched, Avatar, and Overlord. Alright, next unit is Burning Hero Fuse. Shinra is one of the best godly unit with his overpowered passive and stats at later upgrades in this new Fire Force Anime Last Stand update. Burning Hero Fuse stats at max upgrade and max level are 312 million damage with his Blizzard dealing 593 million damage and his SP at 7.66 seconds, making his damage per second at 118,146,214. Burning Hero Fuse first passive, Environmental Awareness, changes utility based on what element on your team has the most units. For an example, if you have more water unit equipped than others, gain new upgrade path and utilities. At later upgrades, you get an ability, Ice Terrain. When activated, freeze all enemies in map for 25 seconds. Once this freeze wears off, he will deal 5 times more damage to all enemies in range, and all water element units will deal 50% more damage for the next 100 seconds. Alright, next unit is King of Heroes Heavenly Sword. Gilgamesh became one of the best unit once you boost him, as he gains a lot of stats and gain a new ability in this new Fire Force Anime Last Stand update. King of Heroes Heavenly Sword stats at max upgrade and max FLR, 381 million damage with his SP at 8.5 seconds, making his damage per second at 44,828,529, which is insanely broken as he gains an ability at later upgrades. He gets an ability called Sacred Treasure. Upon activating, you can choose between 3 modes, Heavenly Chains, Heavenly Gates, and Rupture, which each one have their own unique power, and after choosing a mode, this unit will become unsellable. When activating Heavenly Chains, Gilgamesh will deal 35% more damage to bosses and gain a base crit damage of 75%. When activating Heavenly Gates, Gilgamesh gain a base crit chance of 50%. When activating Rupture, Gilgamesh will deal 20% more damage to a special enemy, and his AoE size is doubled. At max upgrade, King of Heroes will get an ability, Enchant Heavenly Sword. When activated, it will deal 100 billion damage to all enemies on the map, and all enemies below 30% HP are instantly killed as well. Every enemy killed by this ability gives this unit a permanent 0.5% damage up to 40%. Wow. Okay, next unit is Hero Hunter Cosmic. Garu is one of the best godlies with this unique ability and passive. Hero Hunter Cosmic stats a max upgrade and max of LR, 382 million damage with his SP at 9.04 seconds, making his damage per second at 42,256,637, which may seem low for a godly, although it can be changed when choosing which mode to swap him between Cosmic mode and Baldy mode. At later upgrades, Hero Hunter Cosmic will gain an ability, Serious Punch. When activated, it will deal 100 times of this unit's current damage to all enemies in his range. Additionally, steal 20% of nearby units' damage up to 4 and add it to his own for 85 seconds. Alright, next unit is Supreme 1. Ainz is one of the best dark units with his summoning and stats at later upgrades. Supreme 1 stats a max upgrade and max of LR, 296 million damage with his SP at 9.66 seconds, making his damage per second at 30,641,821, which is insanely overpowered. At later upgrade, Supreme 1 will get an ability Death to All. When activated, it will deal 150 times of his current damage in his range after 15 seconds. Ainz' passive, Come Forth Minions, he has a 20% chance to turn the enemy into undead, making the enemy's HP scales with the damage of Ainz, making the best trait glitched on him. So good luck to everyone who's rolling glitch. Okay, next one is Boku Mastered Instinct. Goku MUI is one of the best godly with his insane DPS and ability at later upgrades. Boku Mastered Instinct stats a max upgrade and max of LR, 381 million damage with his SP at 6.57 seconds, making his damage per second at 57,990,867. Goku's first passive, the Protector of the Universe. When this unit or units in his range have status effects applied to them, have Boku counterattack for 50% of his current damage, and this have a 30 seconds cooldown. Goku's second passive, Master of Adaptation. Every 50 takedowns, Boku has a 20% chance to adapt the enemies. These adaptations include 20% more damage, 15% more crit chance, 20% more boss damage, and 20% more range. Boku obtains these adaptations once and in this order. At later upgrades, Boku Mastered Instinct will gain a new ability, Honed Body. When activated, all enemies on the map take 30% more damage until death. His second ability, Final Energy Bomb, when activating, it will deal 20 billion damage and can be charged up to 400 billion damage. Buffs units damage in range by 5%, charge count up to 100% for 150 seconds. Alright, next one is Night King Ring. Night King Ring is one of the newest evolved unit, and he became one of the strongest water unit with his full AoE and passives at later upgrades. Night King Ring stats a max upgrade and max of LR, 251 million damage with his blue flame dealing 327 million damage and his SP at 8.29 seconds, making his damage per second at 69,722,557, which is extremely good, especially he becomes full AoE at later upgrades. Night King Ring first passive, Adaptative Night. Every wave this unit gains 3% damage up to 15% and 1.5% range up to 7.5%. Once cap is reached, this unit permanently becomes hybrid. His second passive, Delusional Night, every 60 to 75 seconds, randomly buffs this unit 25% range or 25% damage or 25% crit rate for 30 seconds. At later upgrades, Night King Ring will gain 3 new ability. His first ability, Elemental Power. When activating, this unit gains 5% damage, 10% range, and gain the Plasma effect. His second ability, Worthiness. When activating, every unit that's damage stat is higher than this unit, Night King Ring will gain 10% more damage per unit up to 50%. Units that have a lower damage stat than this unit, Night King Ring will gain 5% range up to 25% range, and these buffs will last for 60 seconds. His third ability, Execution, when activating, destroy 3 strongest enemy on the map and minus 15% HP to bosses. Okay, next unit is Black Swordsman Berserk. Guts is one of the strongest dark elemental unit with his busted passive and stats at later upgrades. Black Swordsman Berserk stats at max upgrade and max of LR, 231 million damage, and his Hemorrhage dealing 323 million damage with his SP at 9.9 seconds, making his damage per second at 55,959,595, which is insanely broken, especially he becomes fully AoE at later upgrades, making him one of the most craziest dark elemental units. Black Swordsman Berserk's first passive, Indiscriminate Rage. Every 15 attacks from this unit will unleash a devastating roar to all enemies. This roar will deal 50% of this unit's damage instantly and stuns all enemies in range for 5 seconds. For each enemy stunned, this unit gains 10% more damage up to 100%. On the following attack, for every unit in his range that is immune to stun, when this roar occurs, gains 5% more range up to 30% permanently. Black Swordsman Berserk best traits are Glitched, Avatar, and Overlord. Alright, next in is Wukong Supreme God. Jinmori is the best nature godly unit with his passives and stats at later upgrades. Wukong Supreme God stats at max upgrade and max of LR, 115 million damage with his bolt dealing 138 million damage and his SP at 5.74 seconds, making his damage per second at 44,776,655, which is extremely strong. Wukong Supreme God's first passive, the Monkey Sage. Every 25 attacks by this unit, a perfect copy of this unit is summoned and helps the unit in battle, dealing 17.5% of this unit's current damage and applies plasma effect to enemies, and he can only have 5 clones max. For every enemy killed this way, unit gains 2% more range up to 15%. His second passive, the Monkey Sage Extreme. Every time an enemy is inflicted by plasma applied by Mori's clones are defeated, increases the clone's damage by 2% up to 20%. And Wukong Supreme God also increases by 1% up to 10% damage. And when the unit reaches the total cap, it increases the damage of all allied units in range by 5%. Okay, next unit is Kirito Celestial King. Kirito is one of the best light units with its overpowered stats at later upgrades, and he is hybrid on placement, which will be great for early defending. Kirito Celestial King stats at max upgrade and max of LR, 507 million damage with his SP at 10.2 seconds, making his damage per second at 49,705,882, which is extremely strong. Kirito's first passive, the Star King. This unit deals an additional of 100% damage to dark enemies and deals 150% more damage to water enemies and deal 20% more damage to all other elements. Every 5 waves, this unit's range is increased by 2% up to 30%, and SPA is reduced by 1% down to minus 10%. Kirito's second passive, the Black Swordsman. Every 5 attacks, gain 4% more crit rate up to 40% and 2% more crit damage up to 40%. If there are other swordsmen in range, increases this unit's damage by 5% up to 20%. Kirito's third passive, Critical Slashes. Every 5 hits, this unit has a 40% chance to deal 2 times crit damage. If this unit hits this crit bonus successfully, his range will increase by 10% and reduces his SPA by 10% for 15 seconds. Kirito Celestial King's best traits are Glitched, Avatar, and Overlord. Alright, next unit is Sunwoo Shadow King. Sung Jinwoo is one of the best godly with his insane stats at later upgrades and passives. Sunwoo Shadow King stats at max upgrade and max of LR, 94.1 million damage with his Mutilate dealing 235 million damage and his SP at 7.74 seconds, making his damage per second at 42,519,379. As you upgrade Sung Jinwoo, his shadows will fight alongside with him, and his shadows will have the same trait as Sung Jinwoo. At later upgrades, Sung Jinwoo Shadow King will get an ability. When activated, it will deal 20 billion damage to all enemies in range, buffs himself by 35% damage, and buffs all shadows in range by 50% damage for 200 seconds. Every kill Sunwoo gets while this ability is activated, he gains 0.5% more damage up to 50% permanently. Sunwoo Shadow King's passive, Monarch's Presence. Any unit that enters Sunwoo range permanently slowed by 10% and take 15% more damage from his shadows. Sunwoo and his shadows deal 1.5 times more to bosses. Finally, the last unit is Green Esper Full Power. Tatsumaki is one of the best nature heal units with her insane passives and stats at later upgrades. Tatsumaki's at a max upgrade and max LR, 315 million damage with her SP at 6.46 seconds, making her damage per second at 48,761,609. Tatsumaki's first passive, Psychic Zone, for every enemy in range, increased low effectiveness by 2% up to 40%. Enemies who receive the full 80% slow from this passive take 15% more damage. This unit's base low effectiveness is 40% instead of 33%. Tatsumaki's second passive, Indomitable Will. Every time this unit gets stunned, she will gain 5% more damage up to 25%. After this unit gets stunned 5 times, she will be immune to stun permanently. Wow! At later upgrades, Tatsumaki will get an ability, Psychic Hurricane. For every kill this unit has gotten, add 1% damage to the effectiveness of this ability damage, and it has no cap. After ability has been used, this unit will deal the total percentage gained from all the kills she has obtained since her placement. This ability will set her in-game kill count to 0. Sheesh. That was everything for this video on the top 10 must-have units in the Fire Force anime Last Stand update. I hope this video helped you in some sort of way. Remember to subscribe and like, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye.